just because they're Sunni doesn't mean they agree. Just because ISIS is Sunni and Saudi is Sunni doesn't mean that they all have the same agenda. But when we go, oh my God, ISIS is so terrible, ISIS and Iran. Wait. Those are two totally different sides. And in fact, we have picked the Sunni side and we're against Shia Iran. So,
and even more deliberately in the last month, right? Even more in terms of Saudi Arabia's isolation of Qatar, where we have a base. The United States has a base. So anyway.
So just to close that loop, because what you're saying is very relevant, Francesca, is that normally the U.S. government and what some would call the deep state is on the Sunni side. That's the Saudi side, which is linked to Israel, and that has been where our interests are, and against Iran, and hence their client state Syria. So that's the Russian, Syrian, Iran side. We're on this side, right? But now Trump is saying, I'm not sure I like Qatar, which is on the Sunni side. Interesting. And I'm going to agree to stop fighting Assad, which is on this side. Why? Because Trump, and this is part of why the deep state hates him, and why there's a huge movement on the right wing that doesn't like Trump. Because Trump is not on the same side historically that the Republicans and the government have been on, which is Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Sunnis. He is going over to the other side and going, Assad, and hence Syria, and hence Iran, not so bad. So that is a very interesting dynamic that almost no one talks about.
I think the one thing that's going to come out of this, for sure, right, is that this was a win for Trump. Presidential by talking about hacking and meddling, and then a huge win because we got a ceasefire. Yeah, by just completely acquiescing to Putin and Russia's demand.
And that could be. The problem is that theoretically that ceasefire can end, and an act of violence that would have otherwise just been another Syrian attack will now become a ceasefire-breaking act of violence, thus making more news and possibly hurting Trump more if he's the guy that supposedly got us this amazing ceasefire.
Okay, super last thing. So Trump goes to Russia, goes to the G20 meeting, meets with Russia.
It's not going to have ourselves.
Right, that'll come later. Anyway, right before the handcuffs on a plane to Russia. Anyway, and yesterday there was in the news that, so as they agree to a deal about the ceasefire in Syria, the one guys that they will continue to attack is ISIS. Both the Russians and us and everybody else will still be attacking ISIS. There's a news story that Trump is decided to not reveal his plan on fighting ISIS, which he was set to do now because in the midst of these conversations about what are we going to do with Syria and ISIS, etc., because they realized it was nearly identical to Obama's plan. And they were about to release it. They're like, okay, you fight with our local, allies on the ground and give them this and that. And oh no, this is Obama's plan.
Oh, we can't do that.
Yeah, and by the way, what happened to Trump's secret plan for ISIS?
That he already had.
He theoretically already had it. Why didn't he have it release it on day one? Because he never had it. Because he lied about that just like he lied about everything. So there's no secret plan to fight ISIS. There's no secret plan to, we'll beat them so fast it'll make your head spin. Well, we haven't beaten them yet, right? You've been in office for quite some time, and you just realized your plan is identical to Obama's. By the way, one of the reasons is because the generals drew up the plan. Remember the generals that he lambasted throughout the primaries? But we're not winning with these generals. These generals are losers. We're not winning with them. And now the reports are Trump, when asked what his plan is, said, I don't know. James Mattis, General James Mattis, now the Secretary of Defense. He's the one who should make the plan. I don't have a plan. What happened to your secret plan?
What about just like the meme army? What about his troll army? Release that on ISIS. Just put ISIS flag instead of the CNN flag. Done, right?
Yeah. Body slam them at WrestleMania, and I think we should be done with it.
And all those alt-right guys are such tough guys. They love talking about how badasses they are and these white Christian warriors. Why don't you go over there and take care of that big issue?
Yeah. Besides which, your MAGA emperor, or whatever you guys call him, he has a great secret plan to defeat him. Wouldn't it be amazing if you guys executed that plan? Go get him, big guys.
They're not ready yet.
Okay.
It's not big. Okay, well, that was all what was happening inside the G20. Outside the G20, protests raged on. Today, 10,000 protesters took the streets of Hamburg in opposition to inequality, global capitalism, Trump, maybe their first time to do so. Last night's protest was called Welcome to Hell, lovingly titled. Protests were nonviolent, but also violent Of course, this is a classic example. Police are blaming protesters. Protesters blaming police. People say clashes. 20,000 police were deployed to Hamburg. Protesters were met with water cannons and tear gas, and so far 83 people have been arrested, 17 have been detained. One activist told the New York Times, I thought this was good, "We were promised a festival of democracy, and what we're living through is a civil war on our streets." I think a lot of that was from Christoph Klein. I think there were protesters who went there to actually voice their opposition, others maybe to start a couple bonfires, but outside there were definitely people's voices being heard and saying that the G20 needs to represent the people of Europe, the people of the world.
Yeah. So this made me realize how different Europe is than the U.S. Now, of course, I already knew that, but it is like when you get into the details, it's fascinating. First of all, 111 officers injured and dozens of protesters as well. In the U.S., that is not how the proportion would go.
No.
If there were 2 officers injured, there would be hundreds of protesters injured and arrested. 17 detained when 111 officers were injured?
Yeah.
They were throwing firebombs, right? The protesters were. Some. Again, there's black bloc, and there's the guys who were ruining the peaceful protests. Most of the protesters were wonderfully peaceful, etc., but some were not and smashed windows, etc.
Sure.
Now, yes, the police had water cannons, pepper spray, billy clubs. They did have all that. But in the U.S., this is not how it would have gone down. And I know some right-wingers celebrate that. They're like, oh, yeah, we would have cracked their skulls and ended these democratic protests so quick, it would have made your head spin or your head crack. so and so that's a little different. And then the protesters, there's 160 different groups that are protesting, and they're all progressive, and they have socialists among them. They have all these different groups among them that, again, in America would have been characterized as like, oh my God, these guys, and look at them, and one of them threw a firebomb. That's it. They're all terrorists, etc. Meanwhile, the German government's like, no, we're trying to give them as much room as possible to protest, to show people like Turkey and Russia that you can have protests in a democracy and not arrest all of your political opponents, which is a wonderful idea, and why I get more pissed at the people who cause violence inside the protests. And meanwhile, the protesters say, look, Hamburg is a very progressive city, and so this was an act of aggression by the government to even have the G20 meeting here.
Right.
Again, topsy-turvy. There is no, like, in the American media, no one frames the government as the aggressors, right? And the protesters as the innocent ones. It's almost always the reverse. It's an act of aggression by the protesters when the government can obviously do whatever they want. It's almost as if the people in Germany can hold their government accountable. So it's freaking me out.
I just want to say also, though, that it's like the conventions here. It's like any major protest that happens in the U.S. I think maybe the last one I saw that was an exception to this was the Women's March. But when you deploy 20,000 police officers, it is, I would say, already quite militarized, right? And as a peaceful protester, I've been there. You're staring down a riot cop, right? You're just trying to walk, and that it's almost like they're preparing for and / know that they want to, that the cops want to start something, And I think some of the images I've been seeing, and I know there are protesters who throw, whether you consider throwing a smoke bomb back, or a tear gas canister back, an act of aggression, is up to you, but the images that struck me the most were seeing lines of nonviolent demonstrators sitting down and just water cannons, stuff that we saw at Standing Rock and things like this. And I think that the nonviolent protesters are one that kind of scram later on when Black Bloc comes out and starts getting a little more violent. But
and necessarily the numbers are always going to appear when you see the footage, like, and even the footage we just showed would give you the idea that there's a lot of water cannons, a lot of smoke, a lot of fire. And there's some of that, but we're talking about tens of thousands of people protesting, theoretically. And so it's just the nature of the media that they're always going to make it seem far worse than it was. And in the American context, it'd be even worse. That's the only info you'd ever get about this protest, would be those attacks.
I just want to say that the thing that we need to remember about protests around global capitalism is that before you had the anti-globalists, before you had the Alex Joneses, before you had Donald Trump saying, I hate free trade, there were young people in the streets protesting the G20, the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Organization. The biggest one and the one that started it all was in Seattle in 1999, right? I just want to say that Donald Trump didn't start the anti-free trade movement. Alex Jones didn't start this anti-globalist, which is a super reactionary response to what 20 years ago almost, young people, labor union organizers, climate justice organizers back in the day were out there on the streets saying, hey, these economic free trade agreements do not benefit us. And guess what? They were met with repression then. What happened? 9/11. We've completely made a right turn. George Bush. So just to say, look back in history that these protests have been going on. Europe has been a site of some of the strongest protests against, free market capitalism just sort of running amok, not thinking about workers' rights, human rights. Let's remember that when Trump says he's the only one standing up against free trade, because the reality is otherwise.
And let's also remember that he said he would get rid of NAFTA. As far as I know, NAFTA's still in place.
Right.
So didn't deliver on that either. And lastly, I don't want to romanticize either the German government and their response or their protesters. So bad stuff has happened on both sides, no question about it. Just a little different context than what you would see here in the U.S., which leads me to my final point, which is that one of the groups, and you saw their sign there, is Alles für alle. That means everything for everyone. Now, that's the kind of progressive movement in Germany and in Europe that's perfectly acceptable. They probably don't even know what I'm referring to. Everything for everyone. In America, they'd be like, that this healthcare issue is way more damaging to the Republicans than they realize. And I like that Howard Dean is focusing on an actual issue as opposed to Russia. And so that's a long way of getting back around to saying I think that Bernie Sanders' strategy of going after them in Kentucky and West Virginia, by the way, the 50-state strategy, hence Howard Dean agreeing with that makes a lot of sense. I think it's exactly right. It's interesting because when, I helped to found the Justice Democrats, they're primarying corporate Democrats, and then so they could run real tough races against Republicans. No more kids' gloves. No more, but my donor would be displeased if I, ran a race like that. I'm not going to go after the bankers because I have banker donors. No, Justice Democrats don't take any big corporate donors. They don't take any PAC money. So you're talking about West Virginia. Yeah, we got Paula Jean Swearengin there who is breathing fire against Joe Manchin, who, plays patty cakes with Trump a lot of times. So now that's not Bernie's agenda.
Including possibly on this issue.
Yes. So, now, to be fair to Manchin, he has not voted with the Republicans at all yet on health care.
He's just a little bit more out in front saying, theoretically, I really would like to work with you guys. Like, he's not saying he would support it, but he seems like the most, if there was a possible Democratic flip, it would theoretically be him at this point.
Well, if there was a possible Democratic flip on any issue, it would always be led by Joe Manchin, but it hasn't happened yet on this issue. So, and that's not Bernie's agenda in going to West Virginia. He's certainly not against, he's not trying to run against other Democrats or anything like that. But what he's saying is, yes, if we are strong and progressive, of course we could win in West Virginia. West Virginia used to be filled to the rim with Democrats until the Democratic Party became considered an elitist party, the party of the 1%. So let's go the opposite direction and say we're actually representing you guys. And the reason I brought up just Democrats is that in one of our meetings, I said, and I plan to do this, I think Kentucky should be the epicenter of our fight back. So now when you tell establishment Democrats that, they're like, oh, I do declare you're so naive. Kentucky's Republican. If we run a corporatist like Allison Grimes, who's a standard, super boring establishment candidate, maybe we could beat McConnell by pretending to be Republican light. How'd that turn out for you? Disastrous as always.
What if she held a Bible in an ad?
Yeah. I think that if we run populist campaigns, obviously I think we're going to win West Virginia with Paula Jean Swearengin. By the way, go to justdemocrats.com/win to donate to Paula Jean if you want to, or these progressive candidates. But I think we can go all the way to Kentucky. You run the populist campaign. You know what Bernie was talking about? Obamacare has tremendously helped people in Kentucky. And if you take away that option in Kentucky, it's going to hurt real people. And you can't, like the Republicans just run ads. They get tons of money from their giant donors, and they run ads trying to trick you. And it works until your grandma all of a sudden loses Medicare, or your dad loses Medicaid, and then somebody's sick in your family. You're like, what the hell happened? Well, they took away Obamacare. That's what happened. And the Republicans know this. Mitch McConnell, in the closing weeks of his race, ran ads pretending to be in favor of Kentucky's version of Obamacare. Even they know that progressive populist politics actually works. So Bernie taking the fight to them in Kentucky and West Virginia is not a misguided strategy. It's a perfect strategy.
Yeah. I think that also you got Rand Paul, right, from the right, saying the healthcare bill doesn't even go far enough. So this is how out of touch Kentucky, right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
West Virginia.
West Virginia and Kentucky. I've seen clips of coal miners tell Sanders, just like their mind is exploding. They're like, I don't understand how a Democratic socialist is representing me and my concerns better than my own senator, in Washington. And it's like, yeah, because we're actually talking about issues and people and there are studies that show that the people who are going to be most affected by this, the repeal and replace of Obamacare with this piece of shit legislation are Trump voters and are people who are reliant on Medicare. I wanted to quickly show a piece of Newsbroke's video. Shout out to Newsbroke homies Kate, Matt, Nadine. That's our little small team. Because Newsbroke basically thinks that Trump doesn't know what he's talking about on healthcare, and in fact, maybe from all the things he said, actually wants universal healthcare wants single-payer health care, and that his voters, the people who voted for him, are right to demand that he deliver on that. So I wanted to throw to a little clip from that video. Trump actually sounds moral, like he cares. Does Trump care? Because in office, he said multiple times that the failed Republican House health care bill was, quote, mean, and that he wanted to see a Senate bill with just one thing.
I want to see, and I speak from the heart. That's what I want to see. I want to see a bill with heart. A bill that's going to be a phenomenal bill for the people of our country. Generous, kind, with heart. That's what I'm saying. And that may be adding additional money into it.
Yeah, you heard the Republican put heart and money into health care. Wait, what? Is this another distraction from that other distraction? Are we bombing North Korea right now?
Trump actually promised universal health care.
Yeah.
So what Bernie is doing is saying, if you promised it, you should deliver on it. Well played. Exactly right. All right, we got to go to break. We'll be right back. All right, back on Young Turks, Cenk, Francesca, and John. We're with you the whole 2 hours today. I've got some hashtag TYT live tweets for you guys. Cody Blaine writes in, TYT coming back from the break with a soundbite from the movie Friday. Probably just made my day. LOL. Hear you on that, brother. Emily Vandermeulen writes in, the cuts to Medicaid would hurt West Virginia and Kentucky the worst. You are quite right, Emily. That's where Medicaid is actually the most helpful to the citizens. And ironically, of course, they vote against their interests, etc. But at some point, if you vote against your interests and then you lose health care and somebody in your family dies, you might finally realize voting against your interests is not the best way to go. I hope to God that it doesn't come to that. But that is what the Republicans are threatening to do here. Chris Huck, who is part of our group, but I'll read the tweet anyway, says,
You don't read any of mine. Come on.
yeah, well, can't wait. There's good reason for that. No, but I do often retweet you, which
Yeah,
sometimes.
you can get
I wouldn't say
honestly.
often, but sometimes.
more often than almost anyone else.
Is he a favoriter, but then not a retweeter? Are you that person?
Ooh,
You
no.
think?
I believe that retweeting is much more valuable. So I almost never favorite. I favorite things if I'm going to come back and
Is he
read
not
them,
merciful?
right? Which might not even mean that I favorite them. I just want to come back and read them. Anyways, that was uninteresting. Chris writes in, can't wait for Cenk to destroy Ben Shapiro at Politicon. Hashtag get hyped. Hashtag down goes Ben. That is unfortunate. Hashtag TYT live. Okay.
Oh, by the way, I retweeted that little interaction you had with one of his fans. That this fan was like, I can't wait for him to totally eat your ass on stage. And you were like, I don't think that means what you think it means. But either way.
And then definitely didn't
Like
retweet
5 minutes later, the guy deleted his tweet.
But by that
But
time,
the stain is still there.
it had already had like 1,000 retweets by the time he realized, oh no, I didn't mean that.
I immediately regret that decision.
Yeah.
Wow, you're in for a treat.
Yeah. I don't know.
Usually.
No, I didn't mean that.
I immediately regret that decision.
Yeah.
Wow, you're in for a treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Flood of immigrants led them to tighten up the border and make it more difficult to transit one way and then back. So the people who came in couldn't afford to leave again because they didn't know what would happen to them after that. So instead, they simply stay. And every time they try to tighten the border to keep people out, what they do is simply make it that anybody who does come in does not go. The exact opposite of what they have hoped to achieve. And so we don't know what might be coming after DACA is destroyed or not, but you can be sure, based on history, it's going to be incredibly counterproductive.
So I have last couple of thoughts. So one is that I looked up the number. It's 16% of them have homes. So that would mean well over 100,000 abandoned homes. It reminds me of like some of these TV shows, the 4400, the Leftovers, where people are like mysteriously disappear. And there's all these missing people.
Yeah.
And be missing people, ghost towns, etc. It's preposterous. And then
it's going to hurt your property values.
Think about that. And then finally, guys, if you're worried, look, this isn't racial. This is just about our wages are depressed because of immigrants, etc. They really pull the wool over your eyes to get you to think that the most powerless person in the country, the guy who just crossed the border, doesn't have any power at all, is the one that is affecting your wages and setting the rules and screwing you over. No, it's the powerful folks in the country that set the rules. And so if you want your wages increased, there's an easy way. You should get legislators who would increase your wages. Now, look, they can't make you an engineer if you're not an engineer. We're not talking about that. We're just saying that if you're working hard, you're working 40 hours a week, and you got a minimum wage job, the minimum wage is not kept up with inflation. It is preposterous. It's criminal what's happening with minimum wage.
Yeah.
Argue for the powerful to increase the minimum wage, which is actually going to help your family, and it's actually going to increase your wages instead of taking your aggression out on people that don't have anything to do with setting those rules.
Yeah, and while it's easiest, I think, and most appropriate because of the fact that they are the least powerful to map out how the government can directly impact those at the lowest end of the wage scale, the government, thanks to the fact that they subsidize on the state and federal level businesses in 100 different ways in terms of tax incentives and regulation, all of that, they do have the ability to influence wages for those who make more than the minimum wage. They could make all sorts of government money contingent on continually increasing wages at all different points of the wage scale. They could do that if they wanted to.
You know who suppresses wages? Think about it for a second. Corporations do.
Yeah, there's one person who can raise your wages. He signs your check. He chooses not to. And you can be sure his wages are going up.
So now the reason that I point that out, look, it's such a matter of logic, right? So if a corporation is going to make more money if they pay their workers less, who's more powerful? The CEOs and the executives and the lobbyists that give hundreds of billions of dollars to the politicians to set the rules on their behalf, or the guy who just crossed the border? Who affects your wages more? Are you insane? Of course it's the people who are donating to politicians. That's why your wages are low. I've shown you this chart before. The divergent 1978 productivity and wages were going along excellent so far. Since then, American productivity has been excellent. The line continues to skyrocket, but your wages flatline. The difference between those two lines is $12 trillion. It didn't go to Mexican immigrants. It went to the richest people in the country. Wakey, all of this is fear-mongering to try to get you to go in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Well, why don't we break and then come back? We've got some updates on Hurricane Harvey and the relief effort.
We're breaking, everybody. And later in the show, the story about how you could buy verification on Instagram is amazeballs.
It is
I love that story. I did not know that. I love sharing things.
It really makes me sick. It's too expensive.
What you had to pay, right?
I mean, come on.
All right, we'll be right back. Now, you guys are going to think, especially my early behind-the-scenes footage, like, I already went and looked at the comments in the member section. He goes, oh, he's high, he's drunk. I swear to you I'm not. Well, I just tell you I am.
Yeah.
Right? And so I get goofy in the behind-the-scenes stuff. What's the need for the butter with this pretzel? This is already super fattening it up. You don't need to put butter on this thing. Why'd they make me do it? Why'd they make me do it? I'm just saying that this is known as the rear end guy. There's no way that every person he knows doesn't call him the rear end guy. I want you guys to see if you could see the lightning bugs. Whoa. Light them up. Light them up. I will now watch him later. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat. Imagine him, isn't it? Hey, Kiki Cat. Kiki Cat. All right, this is Kiki Cat signing out.
Complex subject. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
You said I had small hands. They're not smaller. I never heard that one before.
Johnny Pie and the Professor, and Little Old Me. I'm just checking. Okay. So YouTube Super Chat comments. They're fun. They're random. Rebecca Rogers says, make Confederate statues the new international restroom sign. Interesting. George Bryan says, marry me, Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Random.
All right, do you, boo?
Why not?
Okay. And Hammerhead is even more random. Where's Rachel Maddow?
Yeah, she's been MIA.
Oh, is that right? I thought they meant here.
Yeah,
Oh my
she
God,
hasn't been on the show in...
Yeah, Joy Reid's been filling in
16
for her,
years,
which has
I
been
guess.
very devastating.
I meant our show.
Oh, our show.
Oh, I don't know. I don't watch it.
Is she on vacation or something?
I don't know, but I hate that Joy Reid fills in for her. I can't stand Joy Reid. Even at 100, I think she's really bad at her job.
Shots fired. Okay.
I would have to watch it.
Yeah, you should talk to Jimmy Dore about that. Anyway, Stephen M. writes in, it's sad to know people attempt to dehumanize others out of ignorance and are unwilling to learn about their situation. Disappointing. Ryan writes in, you know you're being manipulated by someone higher on the economic ladder when they make you upset as someone lower on the ladder. That's right. And we now know
Chaos
that
is a ladder.
chaos is not a ladder. As we found out.
Perhaps not.
Yes.
Well, it's a ladder, but you can fall off.
Yeah, well, you know,
good.
what somebody should have told Littlefinger is that more people die from falling off of ladders than from terrorist attacks.
That's true. I have heard that. Okay.
Go ahead.
We've lost half the audience. Okay, why don't we jump back into big news? Donald Trump is allegedly set to announce the first bundle of emergency relief funds for the Hurricane Harvey recovery effort. The request would apparently allocate $5.5 billion to FEMA and the rest, about $500 million, to the Small Business Administration. Can't wait to see how that money is divvied out, but I'm sure there'll be a rigorous accounting of it. Let's see. And this is the number is big, $6 billion. It's a lot of money, obviously, but you know these hurricanes do a lot of damage. What was astounding to me was what amount of the recovery this actually covers. The administration believes the funding, $6 billion, would cover recovery demands through the end of the fiscal year on September 30th.
Wow, that's
Not the year, but 1 month. So 1 month from now, the $6 billion. Now, obviously, as you go further out, you will need less money, but there will still be a lot of money for months and for years. And what's interesting is that Trump is requesting the $6 billion, which I have no idea if that's enough money. I'm sure that there will be a rigorous debate about that. But it's Paul Ryan's response to that, because he does also support recovery funds. But listen to the way he described what should happen. Speaker Ryan said lawmakers will replenish a federal disaster relief fund to keep federal aid flowing to Hurricane Harvey victims, but that full assistance will come from Congress in installments.
Oh, boy.
And look, that could just be a way to sort of adapt to the changing circumstance, or it could be a way to adapt to people's changing level of attention to the disaster. So that in a month or two, when people aren't paying as much attention, suddenly those installments start to come up a bit dry.
The news cycle certainly has attention deficit disorder, to say the least. So
that's my fear. As soon as I saw that quote, I was like, I don't know about that.
Imagine how many more Trump controversies there are going to be between the first installment and the second installment. By the time you get to the second installment, they're going to be like, Hurricane Harvey. That was a million news cycles ago, given the pace at which Hurricane Trump is moving. And you mentioned the Small Business Administration. I can't wait to see how Linda McMahon's going to spend that money. Oh, no, here comes McMahon off the top rope. Anyway. But my main point on this is, remember Republican projection. It's the number one thing they do. So I point that out because Ted Cruz said that he voted against, he didn't kill it, he voted against Superstorm Sandy relief because it was laden with pork. Now, that's not true. The Washington Post broke it down. An earlier version of the bill had some pork, but that was all eliminated, so they give him a 3 out of 4 Pinocchio. Is not true, right? But what did they accuse the other side of doing? The thing that they want to do. So I guarantee you that Ted Cruz and other Republicans put so much pork into this bill, it'll make your head spin, right? So they'll give money to the chemical factory that exploded, which has, by the way, funds almost all the Texas politicians, gives them donations, and that's why they killed safety regulations around the chemical factory. I'm sorry, it didn't explode. Authorities later changed it when they found out that every Republican in Texas takes money from that company there were pops that caused fires. I believe that's called an explosion. Anyway, and they will give money to ExxonMobil, and they'll give money to all the guys who are funding them. And by the way, other people who funded Republican legislators in the state of Texas, ExxonMobil, Koch brothers, and Saudi interests. Saudis also have refineries in Texas. In fact, it's their headquarters in North America. And so those guys will grease those wheels again, and they will probably take more money than the citizens.
I feel like we should probably stop funding those Saudi oil refineries until we can figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah, we don't know. Our country has a problem, and we don't know.
Probably bigger than anybody ever imagined.
Right?
Yeah. Now, it's funny how they seem to have a problem with Muslims coming into the country from certain places, but when Muslim money comes in and goes in the pockets of Republican legislators, all of a sudden they don't have any problem with that at all. And I bet you they take some of your money and head it right in that direction in the form of aid for Hurricane Harvey.
So wait, Muslim extremists from which country were involved in 9/11? Was it Syria?
No, I'm pretty sure it was 15 out of 19 were from Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But they're not part of the band. That's weird.
They're not. Strange.
It's a difficult name to spell for Trump, so he just leaves it off. He tried like 3 times, kept crossing out, couldn't go get it. Anyway, but yeah, in addition to many other big sets of money that we've said people need to keep an eye on, especially once the housing money starts to go out, considering his interest in that area, there's another hundreds of millions of dollars. Does anyone have any faith that they're going to distribute that in a responsible way? No, which means that journalists have to stay on this and have to make sure that it's as transparent as possible. But that is not the only funding that I find to be questionable. Let's turn to funding of a more personal nature. Donald Trump has now announced that in addition to the federal and state level funding that will go to the hurricane recovery in Texas and Louisiana, he will also personally donate $1 million. Maybe. We'll see about it, because when his representative, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, was asked by a reporter if she knew whether Trump's donation would be, quote, coming from his own money or from the Trump Foundation, Sanders said, I haven't had a chance to do that, to find out. She also couldn't say where the money was going to be donated to, or basically any information that would lead you to believe that his assurance that he's going to donate this money is anything more than a offhand comment that isn't going to amount to anything. Now, whether it comes from his money or the organization's money is not an academic question. Trump hasn't personally donated to his charity since 2008. He might well not remember that it exists. Now, it does get money donated from other people, and so perhaps he'll feel free to donate $1 million of someone else's dollars to the hurricane recovery, but I wouldn't even guarantee that. In addition, if you want to get into the idea of whether Sarah Huckabee Sanders is at all sure that this is actually going to happen, look at her response to another question. She said, he actually asked that I check with the folks in this room, the press room, since you are very good at research and have been doing a lot of reporting into the groups and organizations that are best and most effective in helping and providing aid, and he'd love some suggestions from the folks here, and I'd be happy to take those.
Wow.
I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a couple of things here. First of all, he said the same thing after Superstorm Sandy. And he in fact, he promised Governor Chris Christie's wife that he would give $1 million. He said, just tell me what the number is and I'll write the check.
How much does the check need to be? Just tell me and I'll send it.
And
oops, never happened.
Guess how much he spent? Nothing. Donut.
Yeah.
Okay. The guy is a notorious pathological liar.
And remember
really fast, we don't need to go back that far, because earlier this year he said he would donate $1 million to a veterans group after repeatedly pissing them off. Journalists thankfully followed up on that months later, and only in response to that investigation did he finally donate the money when the weight of public shame was on him. But he wouldn't have done it otherwise.
But on that one, he goes, oh, fake news, I was going to do it anyway. Like, it's like the classic liar. I was going to do it anyway, right? But in that case, at least after the shame, he gave the money. For Sandy, he said, I'm going to give $1 million. He never did. Not a dollar. Nothing.
What I don't understand is why he keeps getting himself in the same mess over and over again. You don't want to donate the money. You haven't donated the money unless there was tremendous public pressure forcing you to do so. So stop saying that you are going to personally donate any money. Look, I get it. There are people who will fall for it, hook, line, and sinker. They won't read the follow-ups. They won't know what really goes on. And they'll think, oh, what a stand-up guy. He's donating this money. But look, the vast majority of people who are skeptical of his claims do follow up, and they do know that he's lying about it. And not only that, there were veterans that were very supportive of him during the election, and now they're kind of raising their eyebrows and realizing, oh my God, he's actually not interested in supporting us whatsoever. He used us as props. So he's really just hurting himself. I don't want to give him advice to help him. So keep doing you, boo, right? But at the same time, like, it's amazing how astonishingly stupid he is.
Well, look, I don't know about this. So let me explain why he does it. A literal answer to your question. First of all, in the past, when he was a celebrity, no one ever followed up. So he would say, "I'm giving $1 million." No one bothered to check 6 months later, a year later, ever did give the $1 million, and he would get headlines. Donald Trump. Sometimes they say offers $1 million. Sometimes they say gives $1 million. And he says he never got caught on his lies. He thought, there's no consequences. Every time I get this wonderful benefit of great publicity for myself, and I seem like a wonderful person, and then I never give the money. That's no cause. These idiot reporters never check up. Now it's different because you're president, you were running for president, people found out. But now the problem is it's become pathological. That's why I call him a pathological liar. He can't help himself. If I had him here in this room, and you say, hey, whatever is provable, is there a mug in front of you? There could be a mug in front of him. No, there isn't. As long as it suits his purposes, right? And so, is your hair orange? No, it's not. It's black, right? He can't help himself because he's had over 70 years of lying with no consequence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then finally, the third part of why he does it is because there is some logic in it. It's actually what the Pentagon does a lot. It's because of what I'll just invent a term right now. Disproportionate headlines. So when we launch a bomb and it kills civilians, the Pentagon comes out super strong and says, it's not civilians. Because they know that's the only day anybody's going to pay attention.
Yeah.
And so all the headlines will say, not civilians. Pentagon says not civilians.
Pentagon says not civilians.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then
when we find out
6 days later or 6 weeks later, Pentagon will say, oh yeah, well maybe it was, and maybe, it was a little bit, and we're still looking into it. That goes in page A17 or A27 of the paper. It never makes it onto TV. They're way past that story. And then when you call them out on the lie later, the Pentagon goes, no, 6 weeks later I did a correction. And that's Donald Trump 101. Trump gives $1 million. By the time you do the correction, that's Hurricane Harvey's passed, Sandy's passed. Well, nobody called him out on Sandy until now.
And we also, we have that in this exact thing in his family. So he said he's going to give the money. There's no proof that he's going to. His son, Eric or Jojo or whatever his name is, he goes and says, CNN's never going to report on it. Fake news. CNN had already reported on it 3 hours earlier. I don't think a lot of people pay attention to him because look at his face, but he said it, and the supporters will hear it and think, oh, fake news CNN. And when CNN later says, hey, we totally reported on this, even though we probably shouldn't have because there was no proof of it, they're not going to hear that because they don't watch CNN. And so it works really well for him. But I want to contrast Donald Trump, who is a little weenie, a guy who's not as rich as he says he is. It's another reason why he continually says he's going to donate $1 million, because that sounds like something a rich person would do. And he sees actual rich charitable people do it, and he wants to do it. So you have him saying he's going to give $1 million, and probably never actually will. But there are people who are raising a lot of money. So, athlete from the region, J.J. Watt, he's a football player, right, JR? Yeah,
oh, for God's sake.
I know he's a football player. Anyway, he decides to help organize for fundraising, and so he sets a goal of he wants to raise $200,000 for the effort, which is a ton of money, of course, and he's not as rich as Donald Trump says he is. And he does raise the $200,000. But he effed up because he just kept raising money after the $200,000. And this graphic's going to be a little bit out of date, but if we could bring up graphic 13, you're going to see the most recent number for that. And that is over $15 million he's raised. That's
amazing.
More than $1.5 million more than I saw first thing this morning. And it continues to go up. It will continue to go up. And that's going to help so many people's lives. And you can see it right there. You don't have to take the word of a pathological liar. It's an actual empathic human being raising money. And we've got a little bit of a video of him explaining what it's going to be used for here.
Do you know how you're going to go about doing that? So my first phase is what I'm doing is this weekend, my teammates and I, we have semi-trucks rolling in from out of town that we've filled up. We have about 9 semi-trucks that are going to come into town, and we have those all filled with stock supplies, water, food, clothing, everything. So we're going to give that out this weekend. That's our first step. And then I'm going to regroup after this weekend because obviously, like I said, I was planning for $200,000, and now with a new plan for multi-millions, I'm going to make sure that I get with the people that did Katrina and that learned from Katrina so that I can make sure I do it right. Because with these people trusting me with their money, I want to make sure that I don't do it hastily. I want to do it exactly the right way. and I want people to know that that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to take my time to make sure I do it right, because I want to do right by these people that need it, and I also want to do right by the people that trust me with their money.
Wow.
Yeah, and you saw there in the graphic you carrying it's /JJ Watt. You can go there or you can Google it if you want to also donate.
So J.J. Watt, arguably the best defensive player in the NFL. I have no idea.
I was going to say that. I just didn't think we had time.
Oh, yeah. Obviously plays for the Houston Texans, which John was also going to tell you.
I did know that.
And I have no idea what his politics is, but now I love the guy. And I think part of the reason that they have given him a lot of money is because people care and they're good human beings, and partly because we've become so jaded by our lying politicians that I have a sense that again, not knowing a thing about J.J. Watt and his politics is person, I don't know anything about him, right? Other than he's excellent at defense. Is that you get a sense this guy's rich. He's an athlete in the area, and he's actually doing it for the right purposes. Yeah. And he's actually going to get them blankets in a pickup truck, and he's actually going to get them food and things they need. Whereas the $6 billion coming from the government is a good thing. The people of Houston really need it, as long as it doesn't go to the companies. But exactly, we don't know. A lot of that money is probably going to get funneled to ExxonMobil for their oil refineries, and we've grown jaded by our incredibly corrupt politicians. Yeah. So when a guy like J.J. Watt does it, they're like, yes, I'll give him money. That makes sense. I think he'll actually give it in aid to the people who need it. Exactly.
So I know nothing about J.J. Watt. I didn't even know he existed prior to right now. Okay. So, but what I love about what he's doing is that it's illuminating the fact that there are a lot of really great people in this country, probably in other countries. I don't know if they can donate, internationally, but the fact that he raised that much money is telling, right? I think with everything that's going on, with the rhetoric that we're seeing, with the hate rallies that are happening, we lose sight of the fact that there are so many great people who do want to look out for one another. And for anyone who donated, anyone who's actually part of the relief efforts, who's volunteering their time and their resources, thank you. You give me hope personally, and I hope we continue taking care of one another.
All right, last couple of thoughts on this. I'm now going to trade for the Texans defense in honor of J.J. Watt in my fantasy football team. And in all seriousness,
you own a football team?
Yeah.
In his fantasies.
Yeah, exactly. It is a fantasy football team. So, going back to Donald Trump for a second, he is not rich. He said that he has $10 billion. If you have $10 billion, $1 million is nothing. The fact that he has already retracted his offer to give it out of his own personal money and that they're backpedaling out of that, you don't even have $1 million. If you have $10 billion, you are the worst person on earth for trying to backpedal out of your $1 million pledge. $1 million for us is all the money in the world. If you have $10 billion, it's nothing. It's nothing. Do you know, the Think Progress tracked how much money Trump has actually given to charity? It is 0.00013% of his income.
Well, that's what Jesus said you should donate.
Yes, I remember it.
I remember that psalm.
Yeah, Numbers 2. Give 0.00013% of your income.
Verse 0.00013. Anyway, So I hesitate to bring it up because we do have to go to our break. But I'm surprised that you're mentioning how he's not as rich as he says he is. I don't know if you saw, but supposedly the investigation has now gotten into a point where they think he's acquired Trump's taxes and is analyzing them. Which means that theoretically at some point that information might come out.
Oh, I can't wait.
And that Trump's
not guaranteed, but it could.
And that Trump's going to need that $1 million for his legal fees. Anyway. All right. We got to take a quick break here. When we come back, this one's going to be painful, guys. An old friend of the show. Congressman has probably been on the show more than anyone else. Has come up with a disastrous idea. And we will not hold back. Young Turks.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Hassan D. Piker and on Twitter at Hassan the Hun. And this has been The Breakdown. Was that good, guys?
Okay. Not enough hashtag use.
Hashtag abs, hashtag model, hashtag woke bae.
Hashtag one black friend.
I'm thinking more rings.
I got him here.
We need more accessories. Way more accessories.
I don't know where to put them.
Come on, throw these on. Woke bae, not sleep bae.
More sexy, too.
Come on, when's the last time we posted on Instagram? Too long. Come on, man. No, we need to post at least once an hour. What's the outfit of the day today? Is this what you're going with? No. We need more accessories. We need.
This doesn't have anything to do. It doesn't. For your gay audience, man.
Yeah, the gays love you, man.
Oh, okay. What else? What else do I need to do?
You haven't appropriated a culture in a week.
We have like a kimono or something.
Yeah, that looks good on you, dude.
Perfect. How many rings you got on? Do we have any more?
I got 3
Yeah,
more.
can we get more rings on this?
And when you're done, kiss the ring. Look at the camera. Kiss the ring. Maybe like a little wink.
Islam's role in terrorism and all the Huffington Post articles were doing well. I was in.
How many likes did our last outfit of the day picture have?
Only like 100,000.
So I think that's where your focus needs to be. I hear you on all the blah 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 social issues. We need to focus on followers.
Kids in Yemen.
We don't care if you sleep at night.
Dab, mother. Dab.
Okay, dab. There you go.
More.
Talk about yourself more.
I'm Hassan Piker. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram.
Yeah, be more into it.
Instagram. It's important for me. Americans losing access to healthcare coverage.
I hear you. Attack Tommy more.
I've done it. So many. She shoots out of her living room now. It's like punching down now.
We're okay with that. It helps the brand.
We made you. We got you verified.
You're nothing
Come
without
on.
us.
So I don't know what else I need to do here.
Dude, just take off that shirt.
That's exactly why Tommy Lauren is stupid. I hate you. I'm Hassan Piker. Follow me on Instagram.
Hashtag woke bae.
Hashtag woke bae. Please follow me. Please.
Thing you have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
He said I had small hands. They're not small. I never heard that one before.
I got a bunch of things to go through. No Republican would have ever voted for Bernie. He would have done worse than Hillary Clinton.
They're so miserable. All right, let me stop myself. Do I say things that are offensive?
If I ran for office, and that would be a trippy day, right? I'd break even more rules than Trump. If I had all the money in the world, I would enjoy that. We have a great show for you. Steve's answer is C. Dave's is A. And the correct answer is, of course, B. You guys are the worst. Here's the story. And it's not funny. It's over too. This seems just comically unfair and ridiculous. The Democratic Party just sucks right now. It just sucks because it doesn't know what it stands for. We should probably wrap it up. Back on the Young Turks, Caroline Stark of Winterfell
Clearly.
says, John is making me rethink my beards are gross policy. Oh, okay. You
Notice that she's just rethinking it. Yeah, she hasn't changed her mind. She's like,
gross. Kind of like Trump with the donation. Rethinking it.
yeah.
Do you shampoo it when you shower? I feel
if I just had what I normally have, I would still do something. Yeah.
So that's a no.
Yeah. But you also have to condition. It's important you condition.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Jess,
It's soft, actually. It's softer than you would think.
Okay.
Yeah, Brent tried it out yesterday. You liked it.
Yeah. Here's who's not going to find out. Me. Okay.
Come on, you're curious now.
I wouldn't touch your beard under any circumstance. Okay. Jess is just me writes in. Trump says what he says because he craves the limelight. He wants everyone to watch him and to play the hero role. Yes, that's largely true. Unfortunately, he's the anti-hero and doesn't even know it. He's the villain. Anyway, Jack Carroll's a member of the Young Turks. Thank you, Jack. And Richard Grubb. So you guys are awesome. Thank you. Now, Steve-O has promised a particular post-game today for the members where he claims he is going to explain all the different fights that Steve and I have had throughout the years.
Oh, boy.
And of
Actual
course,
fights?
We not fisticuffs, but strong verbal debates. And he claims that he's going to explain how he was 100% right about all of them.
Oh, really? That's unlike Steve.
Yeah, that is very weird. But he's
always right.
Yeah. Sometimes with Steve you enter the ozone, and sometimes you enter the twilight zone. So we'll see.
I don't want to enter the ozone. I'd rather touch my own beard than enter the ozone.
Okay. So TYTnetwork.com/join to hear that post game and all the other wonderful shows we have for you guys. All right, what's next?
Okay. Well, what's next is your favorite story of the day, obviously. Democrat Tim Ryan of Ohio has now broken with his party and is pushing for some tax policy ideas that don't seem too far off of some of the rhetoric coming out of the White House these days. Here's a video of him explaining.
To be competitive globally, we have to reduce the corporate tax rate. We're just not competitive globally because of that. The goal for us, and I know the Democratic caucus, people who are against it, is to create the new model. We can't just be the party of redistribution of wealth. We need to be the party of the creation of wealth in communities all over the country, not just Silicon Valley, not just Wall Street, but all over. Obviously, I've been to New Hampshire and I've been to Iowa, but I've also been to South Carolina and I've been to Birmingham, Alabama, and I'm going to be up in Indiana and I'm going to Kentucky. So to go to these places and see the kind of growth message, opportunity message, like not completely anti-business message, not being hostile to business, like play in democratic crowds in communities that know they need investment, know they need growth, know they need somebody to hire the workers that we keep talking about. If we could figure out the big economic question, which really is how do we get wealth out of the coasts and into the industrial Midwest and start creating real jobs by the hundreds, if not the thousands, in places like the ones I represent, that's a game changer, for me.
So, two things right off the bat. First, that he even used the term redistribution of wealth. Stop framing things the way conservatives and Republicans want you to. That's insane. Come up with some other term. I mean, even if I disagree with your policies, you can try to come up with a way to express it that doesn't immediately confirm everything Republicans have been saying. And second of all, I mean, with this as like his economic core message, he's going to New Hampshire and he's going to Iowa. You could probably save yourself those stops because apparently he didn't learn anything from this last election. I know he's a friend of the show and everything, but if he's thinking about 2020 and this is the core message,
yeah, good luck.
That seems a little bit questionable.
That was pathetic. That was incredibly pathetic. I don't care if he's a friend of the show. I don't care if he's been a guest a billion times. I don't care what he is. That was a ridiculous argument. Let's bring the wealth back to the middle of the country.
He said take it out of the coast, not even like make sure both are doing well. He said take it out of the coast.
That's total Republican framing. I don't know where he's coming from or where he's trying to go, but
we don't.
Well, we do know, he's trying to appease his corporate donors, but if you're genuinely concerned about middle America and ensuring that they have jobs and they have decent wages, why don't you do something about automation? Why don't you do something about the fact that the president just applied for more foreign workers to come into the country and take low-level jobs away from Americans? Why don't you do something to protect accessible education? Why don't you do a billion things that could help people in America actually succeed? Why don't you do something to actually penalize or penalize the companies that outsource these jobs? Really? You're going to talk about cutting taxes because that's worked out so well so far?
Yeah. And look, we were talking when we were breaking down the likely push to slash taxes, how there are almost certainly going to be some Democrats who are going to sign on to it, which is bad because that increases the chances that it gets passed, but also that then they can say that it's bipartisan, tax reform. Is it impossible now that he might be one of those? I don't think it's impossible. I mean, certainly, like you've said, you don't enter into the negotiations already having surrendered so much. And then, on the other hand, Nancy Pelosi addressed Trump's proposed tax plan by saying this: President Trump is pushing a billionaires first trickle-down tax scheme that hands out massive tax cuts to the wealthiest at the expense of American families. That is, I mean, you have to say a lot more, but that is the first blow against the tax plan, that it is first and foremost and only for billionaires. Not that it's the path to competitiveness globally for American corporations.
I'm sorry, I have to jump in one more time real quick. I gotta get it out of my system and then you can rage, okay? How many corporations, how many banks pay nothing in federal taxes? Nothing. In fact, they get a tax freaking rebate, okay? They get taxes back. How many of you middle-class Americans, working-class Americans, have to pay federal taxes? And if you don't pay federal taxes, you'll have the IRS breathing down your neck, nickel and diming you, making sure you pay everything back with interest included, right? But Bank of America, Verizon, all these gigantic telecommunications companies that profit unbelievable amounts of money, all of a sudden, no, a corporate tax rate is so high. But what about the effective corporate tax rate? They pay less taxes than working class and middle class Americans, and this asshole has the audacity to stand there and say, oh, well, they're going to create jobs. Haven't been creating jobs. In fact, what they do is continuously cut jobs, outsource jobs, automate jobs, and basically screw us over. That's what they do.
Okay, so John and Anna mentioned about friend of the show and all that stuff. I guess. So, in a long time ago, in a place far, far away on Wilshire, when we did the show, we had a lot more guests on. It was a 3-hour show, it was radio and online. Tim Ryan was probably the congressman that most came on the Young Turks, and we appreciated that. And I liked him personally, and I went out a couple times to D.C. with him, etc. But this, to me, is not personal. And this statement of his and this idea is 100% wrong. And so, and this happens to people, man. I don't know what Congressman Ryan's intentions were when he first came in, and he was very young when he did, and he, went up against an incumbent, beat him, etc. But I do know that Washington seeps in. And I'm so glad we did not base this show in Washington, D.C., because it's toxic, and it gets into your system. And so, and you can put aside his intentions or what happened to him, just judge him on the policy. And the policy is disastrous. So, and the framing is disastrous. You guys are absolutely right. So when you have a Democrat saying, we should stop redistributing wealth, well, you just handed the Republicans a giant gift.
That's right.
You told them the Democrats are the bad guys who redistribute wealth. Well, that's
Can we start it before we stop it?
Yeah. Well, so look. That's exactly right. And so if you want to do the right framing and it's not just a matter of framing, it's a reality, okay? And there is a party here in America that has redistributed wealth. It's the Republican Party. And I can show you exactly, and I've done it 100 times on the show. And I'll mention it again. Corporations used to pay about 35% of the taxes in America. Now they pay 11% of the taxes in America from 1952 to 2015. That's the difference. So where do they redistribute those taxes to? To the payroll tax, which is paid by middle-class Americans. And that went in the opposite direction, from around 10% to around a third of all of our taxes are paid by middle-class Americans now. Corporations redistributed the wealth, so they got to put it in their pocket, and they made you pay for it. And instead of making that claim, that argument, which is based in fact, he helps a Republican talking point by pretending that Democrats are doing redistribution of wealth. I can show you exactly how taxes have gone down precipitously, the effective tax rate for corporations and the actual tax rate, marginal tax rate for the richest people in the country. And the golden era of what Republicans called the golden era, 1950s, 1960s in America, taxes, the highest marginal tax rate was at 91%. That's not 91% of all your money. It was after a certain amount. So in today's dollars, it might be after $10 million. They start taxing you at that rate. But so now, and we had a booming economy. We had a booming economy. We had wages that were going up along with productivity. You could show all these facts. Instead, what we have is a unilateral surrender here. And it's not really, let's be honest, it's not surrendering to the Republican Party. It's surrendering to the donors. Because the donors pay for the really strong Republicans who push the political spectrum to the right and really weak, compliant Democrats who go, oh, the Republicans are so right. You know what? Oh, those Democrats, they just keep taking from the poor rich, from those poor multinational corporations who just can't seem to catch a break. And then what on God's green earth are you talking about taking money out of the coast and putting it in the middle of the country? No, if you want to talk about job creation, that's great. We're all in favor of job creation all across the country. Here, be in favor of a maybe $2 trillion infrastructure package. Why don't you introduce that package, which creates roads, bridges, clean water all across the country and would create jobs all across the country without punishing the coast? You sound like a weak sauce Republican, which is exactly what the donors love. And last thing, this guy challenged Nancy Pelosi, and I got no love for Nancy Pelosi, and I think she's way past her time. But here on this issue, she's exactly right. She has the right framing. And you thought, oh, it's a young upstart challenging Nancy Pelosi, and I didn't know that Ryan was going in this direction. And I thought, well, maybe that's a great thing, right? Now, forget it. You're telling me your genius idea is to challenge Nancy Pelosi from the right? Look at what Congressman Ryan said there. I've been to Iowa and New Hampshire, but I also went to South Carolina. That's the third voting state in the primaries. So that's not an also. That's not a but. That's an and. So you're going to run against Nancy Pelosi, or you're going to run for president as a fresh face, and your fresh idea is to do the same thing the Democrats have been doing for 40 years, bowing your head to Republicans and corporate donors. Sad end to a once promising career.
I just want to say one more thing, just because for historical context, because this one, that take the money out of the coasts and give it to the center of the country thing bothers me so much. Just look up how much each state pays in federal taxes, how much it gets from the government. We're already taking money out of the coast and pouring it in the middle of the country. That's how the taxes work, because the blue states, which are on the coast, pay more in taxes than they get back from the federal government. It's been that way for decades.
Yep.
Jesus, that's disappointing. God, that's disappointing. All right. And, there goes another relationship up in flames. But we didn't do it, he did it. Okay, so...
He's going to run for president. Bye, Felicia.
Not going to happen.
Good luck.
Not going to happen.
Every cycle needs a Lincoln Chafee.
Such a terrible miscalculation. But good, at least we know he was calculated.
Yeah.
At least we know that, because sometimes they do the right calculation and they don't mean it.
Yeah.
They'll go left, pretending to be left, and they don't mean it for a second.
Yeah.
So at least in this case, it's obvious.
Well, it's like they say on Archer, it's a couple years after the election. Good, let's get all the bad ideas out of the way now.
Okay, last thing. Let's do the Antifa thing. I think that's too interesting to turn down.
Okay. The same social media networked bots that spread pro-Trump and pro-Russian propaganda during the last election have not gone away, and they haven't gone silent. They've actually turned their sights on a new target, and it's those protesting against the recent wave of white supremacist and Nazi activism across the country. There's this organization, the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which has set up an online dashboard that keeps periodic tabs on a number of different bot networks and individuals, some of them controlled by computers, some of them controlled by actual people, and looks at the sorts of messaging that they're putting out. So let's break down the bots a little bit more before we talk about their actual tactics. There are automated versions in which software pumps out posts from social media accounts that can be hundreds or thousands of tweets every single day. Others are dubbed cyborgs. Some of their content is automatic. Others are put out individually by a person to help to sort of camouflage the fact that it's not an actual person all the time. There are also human-run accounts that were originally individuals but were taken over during hacks or identity theft. That's another big thing. And one of the ways that you can tell that these are bots is not just that they are literally sending out tweets faster than a human could type them, but also that dozens or hundreds or thousands of accounts will put out literally the same exact message, not retweeting it, but putting it out as if it was their own message. And it turns out that it's not just a big problem on Twitter. They're apparently increasingly expanding to other platforms like YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. Also, little mobile applications on Facebook that I'm not even familiar with. There are chatbots doing the same sort of thing. And across social media platforms and en masse, they are working together to push narratives. And they can, like a collective of bees, they can put out one message one week and then turn immediately on the next one in an entirely inorganic way. And so apparently lately, bots have been working to hype up the threat posed by Antifa, the anti-fascism group that endorses the use of violence to directly confront neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, and other white supremacist organizations. They're also directly attacking politicians who have been critical of Donald Trump's response to Charlottesville or others who've spoken out on it. John McCain himself was actually the target of this recently, where thousands and thousands of supposed people on Twitter immediately began putting out the same exact messages attacking him as having been linked with neo-Nazis. At one point, the most recent tweeted link in one Russian-linked network was a petition to declare Antifa a terrorist group. They're very interested in that in Russia for some reason. They're very engaged in American domestic politics on that particular issue. And the director for that organization I talked about said that this is not simply random, that they're preparing and sowing seeds of discord, potentially laying the groundwork for what they're planning to do in 2018 and 2020. And while the particular targets of whether it's politicians or activists, the groups, the issues that these bot networks talk about change week to week, the goal is always the same. It is to destabilize and bring down America. That is the goal. And they will attack Democrats, they'll attack Republicans. Whatever accomplishes that goal, that's what they use these networks for.
But more than anything else, these days they attack Trump opponents.
That's
exactly.
right.
Yes, they see Trump as an ally in this fight.
But there's no evidence that Trump and Russia are working together. Except for all the evidence that is public and right in front of your eyes, but you don't want to see it.
Right.
Yeah, just to be clear, no evidence that they're working with the bot networks, but obviously there's the other evidence, contextual evidence, yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying Trump told them, hey, go do bots on Antifa. It's just that all of the bots that are out there look to sow discord in the left and look to attack the left and opponents of Donald Trump. What a wonderful coincidence for Donald Trump.
And it's highly effective. And that's the thing that should concern everyone, because the conversation following what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia, should be about condemning the neo-Nazis who carried out acts of violence. Now, are there members of Antifa who have also carried out acts of violence? Let me be clear about something. They haven't run anyone over. They haven't murdered anyone. There was a story from last weekend where a small group of Trump supporters did what Trump supporters do. They went to Berkeley, right, to get people upset. Antifa responded, and they responded violently. And they shouldn't do that, okay? But if you want to talk about violence and you want to pretend as if both sides are equal in carrying out acts of violence, you're wrong, and you've bought into what these bots are putting out there, right? Yeah. Antifa frustrates me to no end, and I will continue condemning them if they continue acting violently in their counter-protests. Don't do it. You're giving them a gigantic gift, okay? But to say that they're just as evil or just as violent as these neo-Nazis and white supremacists is absolutely flat-out wrong. Again, only one group murdered someone during those rallies, and that was the neo-Nazis.
Yeah. So look, I'll go further on Antifa. The people who are doing violence on the left, if they are actually on the left, and I have great skepticism about that, are preposterously, ridiculously wrong and stupid. Because what are you going to do? You're going to out-violent the right? No, you're not. Even if you thought violence is the morally correct thing to do because it's Nazis today, fascists tomorrow, the alt-right the day after, the right-wing the day after that, and just people I disagree with the day after that, it is horrific and a terrible idea and immoral and not the right way to go. It's also, even if you didn't care about the morality of any of that, it's also stupid. It's counterproductive. The minute you open the door of violence, I guarantee you the right wing will be 1,000 times more violent than you. And then they won't just be violent towards you guys, they'll be violent against all of us. So it is so stupid to do that. And the reason I say that I have some skepticism, I'm not saying that it's not Antifa, right? Mm-hmm. But guys, they have 1,000 false flag operations, right? Yeah. We don't do that stuff. And when they accuse us of it, we're like, what are you talking about, you conspiracy lunatic, right? But they think that way. The right wing thinks that way. So, and we know that as a matter of history, they love to plant people inside of left-wing organizations, cause violence.
James O'Keefe got caught doing exactly that, trying to hire actors to pretend as though they were liberal protesters. He attempted to pay them to carry out acts of violence during protests, right? So that type of strategy absolutely happens on the right.
Yeah. So it's not to excuse anything Antifa's doing. I don't really believe they're left-wing. No, that's not my point. My point is, if you are on the left and some idiot says, let's do violence, just get rid of them. They immediately kick them out of the group, don't listen to them, and realize there's an excellent chance that they're actually a right-winger. And they want you to fall into that trap so they can have two idiots throw punches and go, great, that gives us an excuse to run over you guys and murder you and do whatever we want, and then by the government now run by Trump, imprison you guys, okay? And anyone who goes to any protest, because two idiots threw rocks through a Starbucks window, right? And it's a trick, it's a trap. If anyone, even if they genuinely believe it, kick them out of the group. They're going to set you back so badly, they're going to set everyone back. If you're on the left and you're a progressive, by definition, you shouldn't believe in violence. That is the avenue of the right, okay? So, and you're not gonna, don't be as stupid as the right wingers who are like, oh, I got my Second Amendment rights, now I'm gonna fight the government in the woods. You're not gonna fight the government in the woods. Fight through democracy, fight through politics. I'm not telling you to not fight. Are you kidding me? We started the fight. But it's a political fight. It's a democratic fight. It's not a physical, violent one. If you do that, you lose the moral high ground. And yes, you open the door to horrific things that the right wing is more than happy to do.
Yeah. The last point that I want to say about the bot networks, though, the reason I felt like we had to talk about this is not just, what they're doing right now when it comes to the white supremacists and trying to support them, but also spreading misinformation. Like, I think we did the story of the fake Antifa posts saying that women deserve to be beaten if they support the right wing. Like, that's the sort of thing. Like, it's a combination of the fact that these are not actual people spreading it, that it's one individual and thousands of accounts, but also that it's fake news that they're spreading, which is terrible. But that you have to, it would be great if we could go back to the days, if they ever existed, when social media was a place where it was clean and pure and you could go in and you could have a disagreement, you could debate issues, spread information. You have to be savvy, and this is not going anywhere. You might hate this. You might have liked at some point what the bot networks were doing. They're not. And by the way, there's Correct the Record was pulling a lot of bullshit. I know we were targeted by various bot networks during the primary. Like they come in various different forms, but this is perhaps the most organized and certainly the largest scale. They're not going away. They will be around during the midterm elections, the next presidential election. And if you think you have any idea what they're going to do, who they're going to support or oppose, you better think again, because they're savvy and complicated. They're harder and harder to tell from individual people, and the way they function is complex. It's not just spreading a message or misinformation. In some cases, like with the cyborgs and the hacked accounts, they will find natural allies, actual human accounts, and they will help to like and retweet messages or spread videos or articles. Funding can be given out to support natural allies of this misinformation campaigns. You have to be savvy. You have to make sure that what you're reading and what you're spreading is accurate, and that should be the case going forward.
Yeah, and look, I've seen them, man. The Democratic machine also does it. The establishment, it's as John pointed out, the idiots, because they're so filled with hubris. The David Brock Correct the Record, Hillary Clinton supporting PAC, bragged about how they did bots and how they split the left, and then they blame lack of unity on Bernie Sanders and his supporters while they smeared them with allegations of Bernie bros. And by the way, it wasn't just Hillary Clinton supporters. We found out later through some great reporting that a lot of the smears of quote-unquote Bernie bros came from Macedonia. So it was actually the Russians again in that instance, it appears, that was trying to divide the left. So, and it's literally happening to us today. There's these insane attacks about how we have joined the Clinton machine.
Yeah, I know, it's hilarious.
Now, if you watch the show at all, you would find that to be the most preposterous thing you've ever heard, right? But they do, and they attack in hives, just like as John pointed out, because they usually get a contract. Okay, they're like, all right, my contract's for 2 weeks, and for 2 weeks I'm going to say nonstop over and over again that the Young Turks are part of the Clinton machine, and I will put in one thing that is true, one fact that is true, and I'll put in 3 lies, and then I will trick people into doing my dirty work for me, and I'll have them spread it all across the internet. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know who's behind that. It could be these guys who are trying to, again, split the left. By the way, it could be the Democratic Party machinery. I don't mean the DNC. I mean the super PACs, the correct the record type of people who are like, now, how's this for a dirty trick?
Yeah.
They're against Hillary Clinton, so we'll pretend they're for us and get their actual supporters to dislike them because they dislike us so much. We'll split the opposition and then try to put the establishment back in charge of the Democratic Party.
That's right.
So this is the insane stuff that's going on online, and it is tracked, and now some great work, to find out where it's coming from. So be careful out there. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet.
Right, and look, if you're skeptical about anything that we say, that's fine. But just get your news from credible news sources. Just check your sources. That's all I care about. That's all I'm asking.
And if you get snippets of our videos, ask them, hey, where's the whole
Where's
video?
the full video?
Yeah. Because I can't tell you the number of times they take out a little thing completely out of context, whether they're right-wingers or left-wingers. Can you believe what they said, right? And it's almost always a lie. So, but just do your due diligence. And if you watch us, I'm not like some other guys, you have to watch every one of my videos, otherwise it's not fair. No, I'm not saying that, but watch the whole video of whichever video they're talking about. And then if you don't like us, God bless your heart. It's a free country and there's a billion shows out there. Go watch another show and hate us and do all that. But make sure you're hating us for the right reason and not for something that a bot made up and somebody paid for. And again, forget us. We're a small part of this. These disinformation campaigns are gigantic.
They're intended to sway elections.
And much more importantly is the lies they say about the candidates. And that is going to come in a tidal wave very soon. Definitely in 2018, and in 2020 it is going to be record-breaking. All right, we got to go. John, thank you, everybody. Check out youtube.com/thinktank. And when we come back, one of my favorite stories, which is, I know it's heavy times and this is kind of a lighter story, but it's really interesting about how there's now a new bribery scam on how to get verified on Instagram. Man, the world's a funny place, and the internet has made it both funnier and more tragic.
Yes.
Okay, we'll be right back. All right, post-game here in Studio B. It's a green screen magic of internet television. A lot of breaking stories. Any conversation that starts with marriage is an interesting thing deserves a little bit of...
When the kid cries, perhaps that is an opportunity to do so. It's an opportunity to do some parenting.
Yeah, parenting is you cry, you're gone.
Oh my God. I love that video.
Yeah, Ben, I got a great achoo. You're like, my mouth was open, she sneezed in my eye.
I used to have Donut Tower next to my desk. Yeah, I'll dress up like a girl.
I sound confident now, Anna. When we're off the air, I'm going to be like, how is this going to work?
When you get literally asked why 21 straight times.
Yeah.
And like at some point, you're fucking with me now, right?
So I dumped the kids off at her mom's, and I drove down to La Jolla for a day. They're like, but Daddy, no.
Why? What do you mean, why? You asked me to look at you. You did it. You brought it up. You know you're doing it. Why? I don't know why. I was reading. She's lovely. And here's what's different. Like, it is a different feeling. Everybody says this, but it's 5:11 when we're shooting this. I can't wait to go home. Like that. I can't wait to see her.
What you guys do is allow us to be open and honest, and we don't have to worry about censorship. We don't have to worry about sponsors telling us what we can and can't say. We're accountable by our audience and our audience only, and I absolutely love that. That's the best part about being a member. We love you guys.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited.
Did anybody call for it? Editor.
Need this in an hour?
Sure, editor too.
Fuck you.
Canal. He calls his work urban beautification.
I didn't go out to be a street artist or to make posters. I was just compelled to do it. I was mad enough. It didn't matter. It was like a form of minor civil disobedience even. Like, fuck you. How about your higher ground? Power operates to self-replicate itself to maintain the status quo so it stays in power. When you go to do something like this to express yourself in public about an issue you care about, make sure you pick the bigger weapon. And the weapon is knowledge. The one thing about street art, it's not like I put up my posters to change anybody's mind about anything. The difference between propaganda and the kind of art I do is propaganda is telling people what to think. The way the art works, where the art works, is between the time you see it and the time you figure it out for yourself. I'm an optimist. I might have made a lot of ugly things about a lot of ugly people, but it's out of love. Not for them.
I like that old school song about us.
Yeah.
Drop it. A new power panel. Okay, fine. We switch one person. Okay. Maytha Al-Hassan joins us again. Great to have you, Maytha.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm going to read you a couple of quick tweets. They're all about... No. First two are about Tim Ryan. I am Sock writes in, which donor freaked him the fuck out and threatened to pull his funding? Jeff Torres writes in, #Dino. I'm thankful he showed his true colors far in advance. And then Annie wrote in about the bots. Why would Russia need to divide the left when centrists are doing that themselves by refusing to support single-payer health care?
It might be the centrists. We don't know where the bots are coming from for sure.
Yeah, and they call themselves centrists. And I've now talked to a lot of them, and almost everybody in the media is in that camp. Not all, but almost all in the mainstream media. And they genuinely don't get it. They assume that they have a right to rule. And so when they say, like, you shouldn't have division in the party, they mean you should all get out of the race and
don't challenge us.
Don't challenge us. And Bernie Sanders, most popular politician in the country, definitely shouldn't run. But there is no logic to it at all. It's the opposite of what they said last time around. But they genuinely don't get it. They're like, what do you mean? Of course we're meant to rule you. When we say unity, you say, okay, I drop out. And whoever you pick as the establishment candidate is the one I bow down to. Why is it so hard for you to understand? So when you say that, hey, if you want unity, everybody should be for single-payer health care, you radical. You actually want to do progressive things. No. So it's very frustrating. But prepare to get a lot more. I can feel 2018 coming. It's in the wind today. And 2018 is going to be a mess, and it's just an appetizer for 2020.
Yeah,
It's like Jeremy Corbyn didn't teach them anything, and their dream is the French model. Like, let's just go centrist and let's go neoliberal all the way, and that's it.
Yeah, but even in the French example, why did they vote for that guy? Because they didn't know. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that Macron was not one of the established parties, and so they voted against the establishment. Now he is more centrist, quote unquote, right? But I think that it was again another example of I don't want what we have. I will vote against the major parties. Macron, wherever he is, whatever, as long as he's not part of the establishment. Corbyn against the establishment, Trump against what they perceived him to be against the establishment, Sanders against the establishment, and yet the establishment, again, not because they can't learn, but because they don't want to learn. I mean, who wants to learn the lesson that they suck and nobody likes them? Of course they're going to ignore that lesson until the end of time. So we just have to beat them, that's all. That's why the hopes of unity are ridiculous. There's not going to be unity, there's going to be war, and we're going to win that war. Okay, let's go forward.
All right. While the U.S. sits at the edge of its seat waiting to see whether or not Donald Trump will discontinue the DACA program, which, of course, allows for undocumented people who came to this country extremely young to stay in the country and obtain workers' visas, there are executives at Silicon Valley who are calling for Trump to not end the program because they know that it would have a negative impact on their businesses and also the U.S. economy. Now, Mark Zuckerberg has been extremely vocal in supporting DACA, and he got together with other executives in Silicon Valley in order to put forward a letter letting the White House know how these executives feel. So Silicon Valley executives, coordinated by Mark Zuckerberg's immigration reform group, Forward.us, have published an open letter in support of DACA. The letter is signed by hundreds of tech CEOs, including leaders at Google, Amazon, Lyft, Twitter, Snap, and Facebook. Just to give you a little taste of what that letter says, dreamers are vital to the future of our companies and our economy. With them, we grow and create jobs. They are part of why we will continue to have a global competitive advantage. And to give you some specific examples, Microsoft shared in a blog that 27 employees are beneficiaries of DACA. More than 97% of dreamers are in school or in the workforce. 5% started their own businesses. 65% have purchased a vehicle, and 16% have purchased their first home. At least 72% of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies count DACA recipients among their employees.
Yeah. So this is exactly what Steve Bannon can't stand. In a now famous interview he did with Donald Trump, of all people, during their primaries, on a show that he had on Sirius XM, he said, shouldn't we get rid of these immigrants? I'm paraphrasing here. Happy to have you look up the exact quote because it's even worse when you almost can't believe he's saying it. Shouldn't we not have these immigrants in Silicon Valley? And Trump, to his credit, which I don't do often, said, no, they're successful. That's fine, right? Mm-hmm. And Steve Bannon said, no. There's too many Indians and Asians CEOs in Silicon Valley. He said something like it's 2/3 of the CEOs, which is, of course, not remotely true. But he said they don't share our culture.
Right.
What does that mean? That means I'm racist and I hate Asians and Indians because I view them as superior to me. They keep getting the jobs I wanted. And since I'm a loser, I'm going to take it out by being racist against them.
Right. And the context of that conversation was in regard to the H-1B visas. So those are Silicon Valley companies that bring in skilled tech workers from other countries to come and work at their companies. And so they don't come in here illegally. They apply for these visas. They get those visas and they work. So Bannon doesn't even want that. And in the case of DACA and these, dreamers, they were brought into the country when they were extremely young. They built their entire lives here in the U.S. It's the only country they've ever known. And they're highly vetted, and they contribute quite a bit to society, which is why the Obama administration decided to, create this DACA program to give them workers' visas and hopefully push for comprehensive immigration reform. But we elected Trump, and that's unlikely to happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, agreeing with your point, this is clearly not anything about economic imperative or incentive. It is very clearly a white supremacist agenda, because it doesn't help companies, as I said, have a global economic sort of edge. And even if we're thinking about the rebuilding that's going to need to happen after Hurricane Harvey, blue-collar unskilled workers, mostly coming from an undocumented population, are going to be in deep need, because most of the folks who want to work in Silicon Valley and can't compete with Indian or East Asian or other South Asian populations, they don't want to take the other jobs. So, this clearly is either about like hardcore white supremacist racism and or maybe Trump's like very narrow plutocracy. If he's going to try to find a way to just, look out for him and his people. But again, this doesn't fall into line with any kind of economic liberalism sort of argument at all.
Yeah, because they couch a lot of their arguments in terms of we're going to help the regular Americans, right? So one of them is we'll create jobs. Well, and then normally, because they take a lot of donor money, they'll turn around and say the only way to create jobs is just do whatever corporations want. In this case, the corporations say, look, we can create more jobs if we have these people in the country. They go, no, in this one instance, screw the corporations because I've got to appease my base. If you were wondering why I'm talking about Steve Bannon now that he's out of the White House, well, this is the same strategy. Just because Bannon's out of the White House doesn't mean that Trump is not doing the same exact strategy that he did before, appeal to my base. Pretend that their real problem is the Mexican immigrant who just crossed the border. Do you think or these kids who were brought in from a long time ago, they didn't make a choice as an adult to come here, but they've been living here the whole time. Do you think, so what they're trying to do is get you to be fearful of them because they're going to take your job, and to begin to hate them and resent them, right? And that's why Steve Bannon in that interview talked about, they're getting these CEO jobs and they shouldn't have them. He's seething with resentment. But really, you're a Trump voter out there. You were this close to becoming CEO of Microsoft until the immigrant took your job, right? Yeah. It's preposterous. And you'd be 1,000 times better off, actually, instead of fighting against the windmills, doing many different, first of all, voting for an increase in the minimum wage, which actually could affect your wages, and get representatives in there. Vote for infrastructure projects that could get you a job. So vote in the right direction in that sense, right? And then honestly, work hard. And so you don't have to worry about anybody else below you if you're working your ass off. And you might say, oh, well, that sounds like a right-wing position. Great. And if you're a right-winger, listen to that, okay? Work hard, get a job, and move on up. And don't worry about, that guy crossed the border a second ago, or that kid was brought in when he was 3 years old. He's going to be my competition. If you're awesome, you don't have to worry about the competition. You don't see me worrying about any other online hosts.
Well, I just want to add another point too, which is that they're caping for late stage capitalism by distracting folks on these populations that allegedly are threatening their job security or access to jobs. But in reality, we are such a wealthy nation, we don't have to have even a percentage of unemployment. But because of the structure of how capitalism is set up, then folks are always left at the margins. And so they're fighting with who is at the margins. And so, again, if we can dream a socialist dream, then we don't even have to have this discussion and make up these false scapegoats.
Yeah, the false scapegoats. I mean, that is, Republican 101. Not just Republican 101. That is establishment 101.
Yeah.
Don't focus on what the system is doing to oppress you. Focus on the powerless. Focus on fighting one another. Let's distract you in any way possible. In the meantime, I mean, there was a story about how Domino's has partnered up with Ford Motors in order to start delivering pizzas with driverless cars, okay? So, look, those are jobs that will now be automated. That is another part of what's happening in our economy, and we never have any discussions about that. We don't talk about, finding ways to mitigate that. But, hey, let's go ahead and focus on the least powerful people, the most powerless people, and let's screw them over by any means possible. It's really sad. And keep in mind, these are people who didn't have the same government assistance that American citizens have access to. So they've had to overcome many more obstacles just to be productive members of society. And we're going to go ahead and punish them potentially because of this administration. It's just sad. Anyway, all right, let's move on to some other news. A police officer in Utah, Salt Lake City to be specific, decided to arrest a nurse for not complying for a blood draw request, even when that request was not lawful. Now, Nurse Alex Wubbles was arrested after refusing to give the police officer here with the last name Payne vitals of blood that he needed for an investigation because she said he did not have a warrant or meet any of the mandatory criteria needed for taking blood. Now, let me set this story up for you. Apparently, there was a very serious car crash. The person who caused that car crash died as a result. The individual who did not die and was hit by the other individual had severe burns and was unconscious. Now, that person was not a suspect. That person had not been arrested. There was no warrant that would allow for that cop to draw that individual's blood. And so the cop shows up to this hospital and literally pulls the nurse away from something else that she was doing and demands that she draw his blood. And she says, but that's against the law. You don't have a warrant. And also, he's unconscious, meaning that he can't consent to this. All right, so
yeah, let me jump in for a second, Anna. Mm-hmm. So just to give you further context, the guy who was the bad guy in this case, who was driving recklessly, he was running from the cops. So, but he died. He's not related to the hospital story. The cop comes in. He wants to take blood from the innocent victim here, and probably to be fair to the cop, he thinks, well, look, my boss told me to take his blood. It's not like they're going after him at all, right? And they just want to finish up the scene here and finish up their investigation. Now, that doesn't mean that you can go beyond the law. You can't. And so that's going to be the heart of this story. But part of the reason that these laws exist in the first place is you don't know anything about the victim, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe he smoked pot 4 days ago. I'm just making stuff up, right? He didn't, right? And then they draw his blood and then assign some portion of the blame to him. Oh my God, you totally screwed him over. And he didn't consent to that, and you don't have a warrant for that. I'm just drawing up one scenario in which case he would have lost his rights or been in worse shape because you didn't follow the law. So the nurse is standing up for her patient and standing up for the law when the cop gets frustrated and it's like, what do you mean? The law, I am the law. I'm a cop. And that's not how it works. Cops enforce the law. They don't make the law. They're supposed to follow it, not break it.
So we do have a video showing what occurred. There are two portions that I think are the most relevant. Salt Lake Police Detective Jeff Payne is the cop who demanded the blood from the nurse, Alex Wubbles. Now, here is the first part where Alex Wubbles explains to him why it is that she is unable to do this blood draw. Her superior is actually on the phone supporting her decision not to do so. Take a look.
I have this. It says obtaining blood samples for police enforcement from patients suspected to be under the influence. Okay, this was something that you guys agreed to with this hospital. The three things that allow us to do that are if you have an electronic warrant, patient consent, or patient under arrest. And neither of those things, the patient can't consent. He told me repeatedly that he doesn't have a warrant, and the patient is not under arrest. So I'm just trying to do what I'm supposed to do. That's all.
So she's just calmly explaining to him, hey, this is standard operating procedure. We're following the law. This is actually a law that your police department agreed to over a year ago. And he doesn't take that for an answer. This is where things start to escalate. Take a look at the next video.
Okay. Oh, please. No, we're done. No, we're done. You're arrested. Hey, we're done, sir. I had it. Hey. Hey. I
spent 20 minutes in the police car, okay? Wubbles was later released with no charges ever filed against her. She didn't do anything wrong. She literally followed the law. The only person who did anything unlawful there was that police detective, who, by the way, is still working, has not been suspended, is not on leave pending an investigation. He is still an active duty cop. The only thing that's changed is, oh, well, maybe we won't have him do the blood draw work anymore. No. He should be fired. He broke the law. If you are a cop who is supposed to enforce the law and you don't know what the law is, then you shouldn't be a cop. You should be fired.
Oh my God, that video was so harrowing to watch. I didn't see it beforehand, and I almost welled up in tears because it just went from 0 to 100, accelerated so quickly. And this might sound hyperbolic, but 2 words: police state. Like that kind of unmitigated sort of access to arresting somebody. Again, how thoroughly did she go over the legal rights of the patient and the requirement of a warrant and consent? And the officer responds, the officer or detective Payne responds with, it's implicit consent. Like, it's ludicrous.
There's no implicit consent. There's no implicit consent for a guy who's unconscious. It's not a thing that exists. So, or implied consent, as they put it. Okay.
Oh, implied, yes.
Yes. So, look, in some ways I look at this and I think it's funny and a good thing overall that middle class America has not experienced this before. Minorities in poor neighborhoods experience this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd be like, the cop arrested you when he had no right to? It's called Wednesday. Mm-hmm. So, okay. But when you feel it and you see it, and that includes us, you're shaken by it. You're like, wow, they could just do that to a nurse in the middle of the country? That's crazy, right? Because there's a little bit of implicit, well, we know she's a good guy, right? We know she didn't do anything wrong. Okay, but that's exactly what we warned you about, guys. It's not too strong to say that it's a police state. In the old days, and I think I'm old enough to remember the old days, like, cops, in emergency situations would say things like, freeze, you're under arrest, hold, they put your hands up before they shot you, right? In this case, there's no shooting. But before they arrested you, it was kind of a big deal to arrest someone, right? And they had to make sure that they were following the law. And I know that there was a lot of stuff in the bad old days, too. And maybe we just didn't see that. And I include myself. I lived in a nice suburb, so I didn't see that. And I'm sure that was still going on in Newark and Camden, because I'm from New Jersey, at that time as well, right? But now, because there's never been any consequences for so long for police, he thinks, law, schmo, whatever.
That's right.
Look, and I'm so emboldened by some faction of this country, the one that's in charge, saying, no, you should always listen to the cop. Now, okay, look, there's a reason why you should listen to cops, because otherwise things can get chaotic. But a cop's word is not the law. Like, that's the misunderstanding.
The law is the law.
The law is the law, and he has to apply the law. And if he's not applying the law, he's wrong. Now, again, people in this country, minorities in this country, have been dealing with that all the time. Good luck. If you're in Compton, go tell a cop that he's not following the law. See how it turns out for you. You're going to get arrested so quick. Okay? So, but now, it's everywhere. Because we just said to the cops, there are no rules anymore. Do whatever you want. And when you're not going to get fired, you're not going to get prosecuted. So you shouldn't be surprised when stuff like this happens.
I mean, I'm very curious to see what type of excuses people make for the cop in this case, or whether or not there will be excuses made for the cop in this case. Again, he did not know I don't even believe that he didn't know the law, because there were other cops there that were trying to stop him. If you rewatch the video, the other police officer was like, Payne, like, basically trying to convince him as calmly as possible to not arrest her, because that's an unlawful arrest. But also think about the fact that that hospital and that specific nurse would have to face legal ramifications if they did comply, because it was against the law to draw that victim's blood, right? And so that victim could have easily sued if they had complied with that cop. Okay, so that cop is putting that hospital in a legal bind, and again, it's an unlawful arrest. The fact that he hasn't been fired for this is ridiculous. The police chief is like, yeah, the video is disturbing. He definitely needs some training.
No, but look, it's the part of the reason he's not fired is because the police chief is the one that kept insisting, just take the blood, just take the blood. It appears that the police chief is the one that's the main issue at hand here. Payne is like, well, look, I got to follow my orders. His orders are more important to him than the law, because his orders dictate whether he's going to be fired or not. The law, unfortunately, in this police state, does not dictate whether you're fired or not. You don't have to follow the law to keep your job as a cop. You just have to follow orders to keep your job as a cop. And so that's part of the problem here. Look, I think the other cops are in a tough situation. Now, there's a lot of criticism on the University of Utah police officers that did not intervene. But intervening against another cop, I don't know. I want you to do that. I want you to be a great cop, and I want you to stop something illegal from happening. But now we got dicey situations. We've got two cops with guns who are now in a conflict. It's a mess. And that's what happens when you have lawlessness.
Yeah, and you can imagine too, I mean, this is, of course, again, this is probably a shock to people seeing a white middle-class woman who is employed as a nurse have this happen, but it's also a woman, so to see her roughed up and harassed and, very violently sort of threatened to be arrested. I've had a similar experience, not in terms of the physical violence, but I was pulled over for allegedly holding my phone in my hand, right? And they pulled me off the freeway. They called 3 more cop cars.
Wow.
And I was in literally almost an alley space. So I'm a woman by myself, and this is the response.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I would interpret to be a police state. The fear of me having just a phone and calling in reinforcement, that's the same kind of unprecedented, disproportionate reaction to trying to follow orders that are against the law.
I mean, I had a similar situation a couple of years ago that I talked about on the show where, during lunchtime, me and a couple colleagues went out to lunch. I'm driving. I made an illegal U-turn. Cop caught me. As soon as he pulled me over, I admitted guilt, right? I was like, I know. He's like, do you know what you just did? Yes, I do. I'm sorry. And he told me to step out of the car, which was strange to me because I was complying, gave him my license, my registration, didn't do anything wrong other than the U-turn, which I admitted to. Pulls me out and, starts asking me all sorts of strange questions. He's super close, very much in my personal space. And I just asked him, like, please just give me the ticket. I admit that I did something wrong. And then he started arguing that I was holding my phone. My purse was in the back seat. My colleagues were there. They saw my purse in the back seat. And I just started crying. I was freaking out. And when he asked me about my job, and I told him what I do for work, he immediately stopped and let me go. I didn't even get a ticket for the U-turn.
Wow.
So that goes to the heart of what we talk about. Do you have power or don't you have power?
Yeah.
That's unfortunately determines whether they're going to follow the law or they're not going to, right? Mm-hmm. And so now we're all powerless, right? So now Anna has, by saying that she works in the media, had some degree of power. They're like, move, back away, right? But so it used to be just folks that were poor, whether it's the inner city or you're in a holler in Kentucky or whatever, they just steamroll you, right? Now it's the middle class because there are no rules left. And so, and I don't want you to mistake what I said about Payne earlier, like that he was following orders. That's not an excuse. And Payne's apparently a pretty bad guy because in another part of the video, he talks to another guy about how he's a part-time ambulance driver as well. And he says about the hospital, I'll bring him all the transients and take the good patients elsewhere. In other words, I'll punish them for this in another illegal, brazen act for daring to disagree with me. And this is a phenomenon we've been talking about on the show for a long time. What has become the worst transgression in America, the biggest crime in America, is disrespecting a police officer. That is not an actual crime, but the cops have been taught and trained that it's the biggest crime. And if anyone ever doesn't follow your orders, whether they're right, wrong, legal, illegal, it doesn't matter. Rough them up, arrest them, put them away, unless they've got power.
We have to take a break. Let's do that. And when we come back, the story that Cenk has promised, Instagram, verifications, people are buying them.
Stick around. If it was genuine, he was bad. Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, hit up.
I just remember thinking, what is this guy's name?
Cenk the Turk Uygur. I think a TV station is this.
The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It's right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power. We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world.
We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
We're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur. He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And Phil and host beat CNN headline news combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut up.
President Obama's doing the wrong thing. I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can quote support him. He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air. Cenk took an incredible risk. And we're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it? I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, it'd be the biggest talk show host in the country.
I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close. Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Hey, Cenk, what's up?
And I'm reading some of the comments on a YouTube video I did. What's a cuck? Go.
If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee you.
You said I had small hands? They're not smaller. I never heard that one before.
A couple of quick tweets for you guys. Chris Allen says, "Cops being cops." That's it. Joey Banks says, "Did you see all those good cops who stood up to him?" I didn't either. And Bill Wetzel says, "Not very familiar with Metha's work, but I will be now. Very good to listen to."
Oh, thank you.
That's very nice.
Sweet.
Metha, by the way, is a TED resident, and she's also getting her doctorate degree at USC, but unlike John, will probably finish it.
Come on. Oh, I did finish, actually. This is a big update.
Oh, okay.
I did. I got approved. I'm done. I just have to upload it. I know. It was quite a journey. I'm a doctor.
Oh, you're a doctor now.
Yeah,
Okay.
you add that in the little
That's awesome.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Do I have it here? Let me see if That's so funny. It's a nice Middle Eastern twist to that dance. Okay, I'm between a doctor and a professor. All right, go ahead, professor.
All right. Because we now live in a weird world where our social media influence is almost more important than our education, people are buying Instagram verification. Now, this isn't something that you can do through Instagram. In fact, Instagram itself has a very strict policy against this, and if they find any of their employees playing a role in these bribes, they will go ahead and fire those individuals. However, there are usually middlemen who don't work at Instagram, and then easily bribable Instagram employees, and what they do is try to buy this verification or help individuals buy the verification if they're trying to have more of an influence on social media. So the fee is anywhere from a bottle of wine to $15,000, and that's according to a dozen sources who have sold verification, bought verification for someone else, or directly know someone who has done one or the other. Now, it's a status symbol. The blue emblem can help people gain legitimacy in the business of influencer marketing and bestow some credibility within Instagram's community of 700 million monthly active users. Now, James, who is someone who does this as a side job for a living, and he did decide to go by his real first name when Mashable interviewed him, says, it all comes down to money and who you know. It's sad, but it's kind of how life is, you know?
No, that's true.
He also says James would find people who would pay for verification, and his friend on the inside of Instagram would make it happen. He says, I've sold verifications anywhere from $1,500 to $7,000.
So it looks like that in his case, at least, his guy inside Instagram gets $1,200 for making it happen. And that's not guaranteed. I'll get to that in a second. And then he adds a little bit of money on top, or maybe a lot of money on top. So the two things that drive the price are how much you want it. So they kind of judge like, does this guy need it for business interests? How desperate is he to get it? So if you're trying to get an Instagram verification you don't deserve, be cool. Okay, to lower the price. And how easy or hard it is. So if you're a person that might be verified anyway, well, then they're going to charge you less. But if you're like random Joe Schmo dentist, but you're trying to impress your friends in Tuscaloosa, well, that's going to cost you more. So, random dentist in Alabama. But anyway, so that's part of what's driving this. But it's a great story about where we are in America. Because, God, we just need that fame, even if it's just a little blue check.
For some people, it's about fame, but the reality is people have built businesses around Instagram. Yeah. Advertisers will cough up significant amounts of money if someone is considered an influencer with a large following who is verified, and they'll go ahead and pay them per post, per post, and also per product that they peddle out there. And I don't know what to say about it. It's devastating. It's devastating because nothing matters anymore.
Anna, after having done this show for 10 years, is distraught to find out that the world is full of fakes and posers, right?
No,
She's the Holden Caulfield of the young
No,
girls.
I know that exists. I'm more distraught because all the things that I thought mattered and gave people legitimacy don't matter at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, they will work against you. Right? So if you're dumb and, say terrible things about certain groups of people, like Tommy Lauren does, you'll get a TV network job, right?
Or you'll get the presidency.
If you're an educated person who wants to be fair and make rational statements, no one cares about you and you'll be shunned. Like, you're boring, go away.
Yeah. If you want to buy yourself towards verification, no problem.
Right.
So Instagram is trying to root it out. And by the way, they do go through a process. They can't guarantee it to you. So the guy who's on the inside writes up an application and then has to submit it. So his bosses could be like, wait, why are we giving this dentist verification for what? Right? So it does get rejected from time to time. So Anna's probably right. It's mainly people in the industry Who are just trying to get that extra boost by getting the verification.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little academic on y'all for a second, and I don't mean to just like bash on capitalism all day, but John Stuart Mill, he was a philosopher who very much was in favor of capitalism, but it wasn't called capitalism back then. But he was talking about some of the consequences of a system like this. And one thing he said, which was really interesting, is that in a system of commerce, that he called it, you will have and inspire charlatans. So the idea that that you were going to have people who are going to fake it just to make it is inspired by this sort of model and system. So I don't see this any different from like a designer handbag or a designer car. You'll have people who make fakes out there, right? And I know it's really sad that we're doing this for $15,000, but it's still kind of part of, it's transferred into another realm.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So buyer beware on a lot of fronts, including if you see that check, it doesn't mean that they're any God's gift to humanity. They might have just bought it. All right, guys, much love. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.